3 weeks before the wedding, he found the messages. Not by snooping. She left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a notification. Then another. Then another. He wasn't the type to look through someone's phone. But something about the frequency, the timing, the fact that she'd been distant lately, made him glance. What he saw unraveled 2 years. 2 years of planning a future with someone he thought he knew. The messages revealed a pattern. Not just one person. Multiple conversations. Some going back months. Some starting before they'd even gotten engaged. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the language. The person in those messages wasn't the woman he knew. The way she talked, the things she said, the version of the relationship she presented to these other people. IT was like reading about a stranger. He called off the wedding, lost the deposits, endured the questions from family and friends who thought he was overreacting. But 6 months later, sitting across from me in a coffee shop, he said something I'll never forget. The signs were there. Her friends tried to warn me. My gut was screaming. But I was in love. Or I thought I was. How did I not see this coming? That question. That exact question. I've heard IT from dozens of men. Different stories. Same ending. Same confusion. Same realization that they committed to someone they didn't actually know. And the same painful recognition that the information was available. They just chose not to look. This video isn't about becoming paranoid. IT's not about treating women like suspects. IT's about something far more important. Learning to see past the performance to the pattern. Learning to gather information responsibly before making life-changing decisions. Learning to trust your judgment even when your attraction is arguing loudly in the opposite direction. Because here's what nobody tells you. Vetting, so many isn't suspicious, it's survival. And the men who skip this step aren't trusting. They're just unprepared for the moment when trust needs to be based on evidence, not hope. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, IT will direct your life, and you will call IT fate. Most men approach relationships unconsciously. They follow attraction. They follow feelings. They follow the script they learned from movies and songs. And then they're shocked when reality doesn't match the fantasy. Today, we're making the unconscious conscious. We're building a system for learning who someone actually is before you commit to who you hope they'll be. Let me show you why this matters. There are 3 types of men when IT comes to relationships. The naive, the paranoid, and the observer. The naive man believes everything at face value. He thinks asking questions shows distrust. He confuses ignorance with innocence. He gets blindsided most often because he refuses to investigate until it's too late. The paranoid man interrogates, like a detective. He treats every interaction as a potential deception. He creates such a defensive dynamic that even honest women start hiding things, just to avoid his constant suspicion. He attracts the best liars because his paranoia forces them to get better at lying. The observer is different. He asks strategic questions. He watches patterns over time. He creates conditions where truth feels safer than deception. He gathers information without playing games. He makes decisions based on evidence, not assumptions. This is who you want to become. Not suspicious. Discerning. The difference between these 3 types isn't intelligence. It's awareness. The naive man is unconscious. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. The paranoid man is reactive. He's been hurt before, and now he sees threats everywhere. The observer is conscious. He understands human psychology well enough to read between the lines without becoming cynical. Nietzsche said that one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But he also understood that chaos without structure is just destruction. You need to be open to connection while maintaining the structure of discernment. You need to be vulnerable while protecting yourself from people who would exploit that vulnerability. Here's the first principle you need to understand. Attraction is the enemy of accurate judgment. When you're attracted to someone, your brain actively works against you. It minimizes red flags. IT interprets ambiguous behavior in the most favorable light. IT fills information gaps with positive assumptions. She seems quiet and reserved. Your attracted brain assumes she's modest and thoughtful. She seems emotionally vulnerable. Your brain assumes she's just been hurt before and needs the right man. She has gaps in her story. Your brain assumes she's private and will open up with time. None of these assumptions are based on evidence. They're based on what you want to believe, because attraction has hijacked your judgment. This is biological. Sigmund Freud understood that we're driven by unconscious desires that often contradict our conscious intentions. When you're attracted to someone, your unconscious wants to keep that attraction alive. So it suppresses information that might threaten it. You literally become less intelligent when you're attracted to someone. Your IQ doesn't drop, but your ability to think critically about that specific person does. The more attractive you find someone, the more you need systems to counteract this bias. You need to force yourself to consider alternative interpretations. You need to ask questions you don't want to ask. You need to notice what you're not being told as much as what you are being told. Here's a test that reveals everything. Imagine your best friend is dating this woman. Remove yourself from the equation completely. Now look at her behavior, her history, her patterns. What would you tell your friend? Be honest. Would you tell him to marry her? Would you tell him to slow down? Would you tell him to get more information? The advice you'd give him is probably the advice you should be taking yourself. But attraction makes that objectivity nearly impossible without conscious effort. Robert Greene teaches that the first rule of power is never outshine the master. But there's a deeper rule underneath. Never let anyone master you through your own desires. When you let attraction override your judgment, you've been mastered. You've handed control of your future to someone whose character you haven't verified. That's not love. That's recklessness. So before we talk about how to learn about someone's past, we need to establish why most men fail at this. And the answer is simple. They don't want to know. They want to believe. They want the fantasy. They want the feeling of being in love more than they want the reality of being with someone compatible. This is the first thing you need to change. You need to want truth more than comfort. You need to prioritize knowing over feeling, because feelings fade. But decisions based on incomplete information, those consequences last. Are you ready to become an observer? Ready to see what others miss? Here's the system. I call it the 90-day observation protocol. Not because 90 days is magic, but because research shows that most people can't maintain a performance longer than 3 months. The real person always emerges. Your job is making sure you're paying attention when it does. Days 1 through 30. The baseline period. This is where you watch how she treats people who can't do anything for her. Servers at restaurants. Cashiers at stores. People she never see again. This reveals baseline character. When there's no social benefit to being kind, is she kind anyway? When there's nitrogen monoxide one watching, how does she behave? Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. You can see someone's soul in how they treat people. They don't need to impress. If she's rude to a waiter but sweet to you, understand something. You're seeing a performance. The rudeness is real. The sweetness is strategic. Watch how she talks about people who aren't in the room. Does she gossip? Does she tear down other women? Does she speak with casual cruelty about people she claims to care about? Because eventually, you'll be the person who's not in the room. And she'll talk about you the same way. Days 30 through 60. The stress period. Now you introduce pressure. Not manufactured drama. Real-life stress. Plans that fall through. Inconveniences. Disappointments. Minor conflicts. Watch what happens. Does she handle disappointment with grace, or does she spiral? Does she blame others or take responsibility? Does she communicate clearly or shut down? Jordan Peterson says that you can't judge someone's character when everything's going well. You need to see them under pressure. When they're tired, when they're stressed, when things aren't working out, that's when the mask slips. When you see what's underneath the performance, pay attention to how she handles being wrong. Can she admit mistakes? Can she apologize without making excuses? Or does she deflect, blame, and twist the situation until somehow you're the one apologizing? This pattern doesn't get better with time. IT gets worse. Days 60 through 90. The interrogation period. Now you ask the hard questions. And you do it directly. Not accusatory, not suspicious, just honest inquiry from someone who's considering. A serious commitment. Ask about her longest relationship. What worked? What didn't? Why did it end? Listen to how she tells the story. Is she reflective or just blaming? Can she articulate what she learned? Or is every ex just a villain in her story? Because if all her exes are crazy, controlling, or abusive, you're looking at the common denominator. The problem isn't them. It's her. Ask about her relationship with her father. This isn't pop psychology. Carl Jung understood that we carry templates from our first relationships into all future ones. A woman's relationship with her father shapes how she relates to men. You're not looking for a perfect relationship. You're trying to understand the pattern she's working from. Ask about her goals and timeline. Does she want marriage? Children? When do her answers match her actions? Or is there a disconnect between what she says she wants and how she's actually living? Words are easy. Alignment between words and behavior is rare. Ask about difficult topics. Financial history. Past traumas. Health issues. Family obligations. These conversations are uncomfortable, but they're less uncomfortable than discovering these things after you've committed. If she can't handle these questions now, she can't handle partnership later. Here's what you're listening for. Not perfect answers. Honesty, consistency. Self-awareness. The ability to take responsibility. The capacity to reflect and learn. These qualities matter more than a clean past. Because everyone has a past. What separates people is whether they've learned from it. Machiavelli advised that you should never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. But I'd modify that for relationships. You should ask questions you're prepared to hear any answer to. Because if you're only ready to hear what you want to hear, you're not vetting. You're just confirming your bias. Now let me give you the red flags. The things that should make you pause, investigate deeper, or walk away entirely. These aren't preferences. These are patterns that predict serious problems. Red flag 1. She's not like other girls. When a woman says this, she's telling you she can't maintain female friendships. That's not because she's special. It's because women see through her in ways men initially don't. If she can't keep friends who share her gender, that's data. Red flag 2. All her exes are crazy. Maybe one was. Maybe even two. But if every single person who came before you is portrayed as unstable, controlling, or abusive, the common variable is her. Either she has terrible judgment and keeps choosing awful people, or she drives people to extremes and then rewrites history. Red flag 3. She wants to move very fast. Talking about moving in together after a few weeks. Discussing. Marriage, after a few months. This isn't passion. This is urgency. And urgency prevents investigation. Healthy people who have nothing to hide can wait. People who need you to commit before you can think clearly are hiding something. Red flag 4. She mirrors everything you say. She loves all the same things you love. She wants exactly what you want. She has nitrogen monoxide, strong opinions that differ from yours. That's not compatibility. That's performance. She's showing you what you want to see instead of who she actually is. Red flag 5. She has nitrogen monoxide. Close friends from childhood. Everyone has some turnover in friendships. But if there's not a single person from her past who's still in her life, that reveals a pattern of burning bridges, of creating conflicts, of being unable to maintain long-term relationships. Red flag 6. Her stories don't add up. Small inconsistencies that don't match. Details that change with each telling. These aren't memory lapses. These are lies that she can't keep straight. And small lies reveal the willingness to tell big ones. Red flag 7. She love bombs, you early. Excessive compliments. Intense declarations of feeling. Moving from stranger to soulmate in record time. This isn't love. This is manipulation. Real connection builds gradually. Instant intensity is a red flag, not romance. Red flag 8. She tests your boundaries constantly, pushing to see what you'll tolerate. Small violations that escalate, seeing how much you'll accept before you push back. This is reconnaissance. She's mapping your limits, so she knows exactly how far she can go. Red flag 9. She can't articulate what she learned from past relationships. She can tell you what went wrong, but she can't tell you what she learned about herself. This means there's been no growth. Nitrogen, monoxide, self-examination. No development. She's the same person who failed before. She fail again. Red flag 10. She badmouths her family constantly. Maybe her family is terrible. But if she speaks with contempt about the people who raised her, understand that contempt spreads. Eventually, you'll be on the receiving end of it too. These aren't judgments. They're predictions. Past behavior predicts future behavior. Patterns repeat until they're consciously interrupted. If you see these flags, you have 3 options. Investigate deeper. Walk away. Or ignore them and pay the price later. Let me tell you about the biggest mistake men make. The savior complex. She's had a difficult past, rough childhood, bad relationships, maybe some choices she's not proud of. And part of you thinks, I can be different. I can give her the stability she never had. I can be the one who finally treats her right. I can heal her. This feels noble. It feels like love. It feels like you're seeing her potential when others only saw her problems. But here's the truth that will save you years of pain. You cannot save someone from their own patterns. You cannot love someone into stability. You cannot create wholeness for someone who is fundamentally fragmented. Arthur Schopenhauer understood that we don't choose what we want. We only choose how to pursue what we already want. If someone hasn't chosen to heal themselves, your love won't choose it for them. All your effort, all your sacrifice, all your patience, none of it transforms someone who isn't already committed to their own transformation. The savior complex is attractive because it gives you a role. The hero, the rescuer, the good man who sees value where others saw problems. But that role is a trap, because if you're the rescuer, you have to keep rescuing. You can never just be partners. You can never just be equals. The dynamic is set, and it's exhausting. I learned this the hard way. I dated someone with a troubled past. I saw the red flags and called them opportunities for growth. I saw the patterns and convinced myself love would break them. I poured everything into being the stability she needed, and it drained me. Financially, emotionally, mentally. Because you can't fix someone who's not fixing themselves. When I did, I was angry. Not at her, at myself. For ignoring what I knew, for choosing the fantasy over the reality. For believing that my love was powerful enough to overcome her patterns. That's ego, not love. Thinking you're special enough to succeed where everyone else failed. Carl Jung taught that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation requires both chemicals to be stable. If one is volatile, the reaction doesn't create something new. It creates an explosion. Choose someone who has already done the work, who has processed their trauma, who has learned from their past, who has developed self-awareness and emotional regulation. Not someone you hope will develop those things because you love them enough. Now let's talk about what you're actually looking for. Not perfection. Not a flawless past. Not someone who's never made mistakes. You're looking for self-awareness, growth, responsibility, the capacity to reflect and change. Here are the questions that reveal these qualities. When you ask about her past relationships, listen for specific learnings. Not just what went wrong, but what she discovered about herself. Not just what he did, but what she contributed. Not just the ending, but the evolution. A woman with self-awareness will say things like, I realized I was attracted to unavailable men because I was afraid of real intimacy. Or, I learned that I use anger to push people away when I'm scared of being vulnerable. Oh, I contributed to that dynamic by not communicating my needs clearly. This is gold. This is someone who's done internal work, who can look at patterns, who takes responsibility, who's capable of growth. Compare that to someone who says, he was just toxic. He changed. He wasn't who I thought he was. All external blame. Nitrogen, monoxide, internal examination. When you ask about her goals, watch for alignment between words and actions. If she says she wants children, but hasn't made any, lifestyle changes to prepare for that. If she says she wants marriage, but has made nitrogen monoxide practical steps toward building a life that can accommodate partnership. If she says she values health, but treats her body like it's disposable. Words, without action, are just noise. Epictetus taught that we have control over our minds, not external events. A woman who blames everything on external circumstances hasn't learned this lesson. She's still at the mercy of whatever happens to her. You don't want to build a life with someone who's reactive. You want someone who's responsive, who can influence outcomes rather than just react to them. When you ask about difficult topics, pay attention to her comfort with discomfort. Can she sit with hard questions? Or does she deflect, get defensive, or shut down? The ability to have difficult conversations is essential for partnership. If she can't handle discomfort in dating, she definitely can't handle it in marriage. Look for consistency over time. Does her story stay the same, or does it shift depending on her mood, on who's asking, on what she thinks you want to hear? Honest people have consistent stories because they're telling the truth. Liars have shifting stories because they can't remember what they said before. Nietzsche wrote that one must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But he also understood that chaos without integration is just destruction. You want someone who has wrestled with their chaos and integrated IT. Not someone still drowning in IT. Here's a question that reveals everything. Ask her, if I talked to your ex, what would he say about you? Watch her reaction. An honest woman will acknowledge both strengths and weaknesses. She'll say something like, he'd probably say I'm loyal but can be stubborn. Oh, he'd tell you I'm supportive but sometimes struggle with anxiety. A dishonest woman will only give you the good. He'd say I was the best thing that ever happened to him, or he'd say I was perfect and he messed it up. This is image management, not honesty. Another revealing question. What patterns from your past relationships are you working on not repeating? If she says, none, I don't have patterns, everything was their fault, walk away. Everyone has patterns. Self-aware people work on them. If she says, I tend to avoid conflict and let resentment build, so I'm working on communicating directly, that's so. If I used to choose men who needed fixing, so now I am focusing on choosing emotionally stable partners. That's growth. Pay attention to how she talks about personal growth. Does she read? Does she go to therapy? Does she have practices that help her process emotions and develop self? Or does she just consume entertainment and complain about her problems? Personal growth isn't about being perfect. IT is about being intentional, about recognizing patterns, about doing the work to become better. If she's not doing that work, she's the same person she's always been. And the same person creates the same results. Here's what women watching this need to understand. I'm not teaching men to be suspicious of you. I'm teaching them to be discerning. And frankly, you should be doing exactly the same vetting of men. Healthy people with nothing to hide want to be known. They want partners who chose them with eyes open, not partners who fell for a performance. If you react badly to a man doing his due diligence, that tells him you need men who don't investigate. That should be the end of the relationship, because a partnership requires transparency. And if you can't be transparent, you're not ready for partnership. The goal isn't to find someone perfect. It's to find someone honest. Someone self-aware, someone committed to growth. Someone whose patterns you can live with and whose values align with yours. That's rare, but it's findable if you're willing to look. Now let's address the mistakes men make when they sense something's wrong. The first mistake is pulling back to create distance, acting uninterested to provoke pursuit, creating tests to see how she'll respond, using manipulation to gauge loyalty. None of this builds what you actually need, which is trust and honest information. When you play games, you get game playing back. You create a dynamic where both people are performing instead of being genuine. And in that performance, you'll never learn who she really is. She's too busy responding to your manipulation to show you her authentic self. Robert Greene warns about this. He says that power struggles reveal who's better at power struggles, not who has a better character. If you want to know someone's character, you need to create conditions where they feel safe enough to show it, not conditions where they're constantly defending or strategizing. The second mistake is rushing, moving in together too fast, getting engaged too quickly, skipping the observation periods because you're excited, or because she's pushing for commitment. Time is your friend in relationships. IT reveals truth. The person someone is on date 3 isn't the person they are at month 6. You need to see someone across multiple contexts, multiple moods, multiple situations before you know who they are. Machiavelli taught that time is the father of truth. The longer you observe, the clearer reality becomes. People can maintain performances for weeks, sometimes months, but eventually, the real person emerges. Your job is making sure you see that person before you've committed your life to them. The third mistake is explaining away red flags. You see something that bothers you, but you convince yourself IT's not that bad. You create stories that make IT acceptable. She's just stressed. She's been hurt before. She'll change once she feels secure. These explanations feel rational, but they're just your attraction protecting itself from information that might threaten IT. Marcus Aurelius wrote that everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not truth. But I'd modify that. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the second, third, or fourth demonstration. The pattern is the truth, not the explanation. You create to make yourself feel better about ignoring I. The fourth mistake is the scarcity mindset. believing that if this doesn't work out, you won't find anyone else. That she's your best option, so you need to make it work, even if the signs aren't good. This desperation clouds judgment. It makes you accept less than you deserve. It keeps you in situations that are slowly destroying you. Scarcity creates poor decisions. When you believe resources are limited, you cling to whatever you have, even if it's bad for you. But the truth is, there are millions of women in the world. If this one isn't right, another one will be. You don't need this specific person. You need a person who's actually compatible with you. The fifth mistake is ignoring your gut. Your instinct is telling you something's wrong, but you can't articulate what. So you dismiss it. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You convince yourself, but your gut is usually processing information your conscious mind hasn't assembled yet. Sigmund Freud understood that the unconscious mind picks up on patterns that the conscious mind misses. When something feels wrong, there's usually a reason. You just haven't articulated it yet. The men who avoid disaster are the ones who investigate that feeling instead of suppressing it. Here's what I want you to understand. Learning about someone's past isn't about punishing them for their mistakes. IT's about understanding patterns. IT's about knowing who you're actually choosing. IT's about making decisions based on reality instead of fantasy. Everyone has a past. Everyone has made mistakes. The question isn't whether someone has a clean history. The question is whether they've learned from their history, whether they've grown, whether they've developed self-awareness and emotional regulation, whether their patterns are compatible with the future you're trying to build. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also understood that becoming who you are requires separating from collective expectations. Most men approach relationships based on social scripts. What they're supposed to want, what they're supposed to overlook, what they're supposed to prioritize. Forget the scripts. Build your own criteria based on your values, your goals, your needs, not what society says you should want. What do you actually need to build a life that works for you? Some men will call this cynical. They'll say, you're overthinking. They'll tell you to just follow your heart. These are the men who get blindsided, who lose years to the wrong person, who end up bitter and broken because they trusted feelings over evidence. You can be open to love while being strategic about who you love. You can be vulnerable while protecting yourself from people who would exploit that vulnerability. These aren't contradictions. They're the mark of emotional intelligence. Nietzsche taught that you must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have never first become ashes? Some of you have been burned before. You've been the man in the opening story. You've been blindsided. You've committed to someone you didn't actually know. That pain can become wisdom. But only if you're willing to examine what you did wrong, not what she did wrong. What you ignored. What questions you didn't ask. What signs you explained away. Your mistakes are the lessons that prevent future disaster. Keep a written record, not to dwell on the past, but to have something concrete when you're in a new relationship and old patterns start emerging. In the heat of attraction, we forget the lessons we learned in pain. Writing them down makes them harder to ignore. Here's your action plan. Before you commit to anyone, implement the 90-day observation protocol. Watch how she treats people who can't benefit her. Stress, and watch how she handles IT. Ask the hard questions and listen to how she answers. Look for self-awareness, growth, and responsibility. Watch for red flags and investigate them. Instead of explaining them away, use the objectivity test. Imagine your best friend is dating this woman. What would you tell him? That's probably what you should be doing. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't suppress IT. Choose from abundance, not scarcity. Build a life you enjoy without a partner. From that fullness, you can evaluate clearly. And finally, let go of the fantasy. Real love isn't blind. Real love sees clearly and chooses anyway. The fantasy version requires willful ignorance. Real love can acknowledge imperfection without being destroyed by it. You deserve to know who you're committing to. You deserve to make the biggest decision of your life with your eyes open. And she deserves a partner who chose her based on who she actually is, not who you imagined her to be. Honest assessment isn't the enemy of love. It's the foundation of love that lasts. Now go implement this. Your future self will thank you.